Story 1. The Dark Mansion, a text-based horror game. About a week ago my friend went missing. The day after I received an email from him. Inside was a link and a single line of text. You need to try this out. The link led me to a website with a download for a text-based horror game called The Dark Mansion. There were a few screenshots of the game, old school pixel art of a creepy looking house, some guys wearing hoods with no faces, and a woman tied to a table. Save the girl or save yourself. You decide in this exciting text-based horror. Escape from the mansion before the monks find you. But be careful, 3 times and it's game over, permanently. Are you smart enough to escape the mansion? Download The Dark Mansion for free now. I clicked the link and installed the game. Old school MIDI music blared as I opened the file. I turned the volume off, waiting for one of the neighbors to start banging on the walls for waking them up so late. Press enter to play flashed at the bottom of the screen. Why did Teddy send me this? Did he schedule the email to send before he went missing? Was there a clue to be found somewhere in the game? I pressed enter. You see a large mansion before you. It's old, dark, scary. Will you go in? Yes. You enter the mansion. The door creaks but the entrance is empty. There are stairs ahead of you and a door to the left and right. Where will you go? I picked randomly. Left door. You are crushed to death by a falling anvil. Will you play again? A pixelated blood splatter appeared in what appeared to be the mansion study. A desk sat in the middle of the room with a large bookshelf behind it. There was a painting of the hooded monks on the far left wall and beneath it a pedestal with a human skull sitting on top. Well, that was 1 death down. 2 to go. Yes. I typed. I was in front of the mansion again. You see a large mansion before you once more. It's old, dark, scary. Will you go in? Yes. You enter the mansion. The door creaks but the entrance is still empty. There are stairs ahead of you and a door to the left and right. Where will you go? Well, I knew which way I wasn't going to go this time. Stairs. You go upstairs. There is a red door, a blue door, and a yellow door. Which door will you go through? I wondered if sudden death was waiting behind any of these particular doors. The website flashed through my mind. Die 3 times and it's game over, permanently. Would the game stop working after that? I'd already died once, that meant I had 2 attempts left. 2 attempts and 3 doors. Yellow. Red seemed like it would just lead to more death, and besides, I like yellow more than blue. Lightning flashed outside, startling me in my chair. The wind picked up and rain began to fall. Just 5 minutes ago the sky was clear, not a single cloud in sight. Lightning flashes and you see a hooded figure in the distance. It's coming for you. What will you do? Lightning continued to flash through the window in the game. Like it said, one of the hooded figures was standing on the mountain visible through the window in the distance. It was kinda creepy. It was also the first time I was given a little freedom in what to do next, however. Open desk. There's nothing inside. Use phone. The phone doesn't work. Shoot hooded figure. You don't have a gun. Get gun. There is no gun. I sighed. The room appeared to be a dead end. I drew closer to the monitor and tried to find something, anything I might be able to do in the room. Nothing I typed worked. I sat back in my chair and began to type again when I noticed it. The hooded figure, it was closer. It wasn't just a flashing GIF background. The figure was actually getting closer. Crap. Leave room. You leave the room. There is a red door, a blue door, and a yellow door. Which door will you go through? Blue. You are in a hallway. There are doors marked 1 to 13. Which will you choose? It was a dark hallway leading into the distance. The doors got smaller but I could see numbers on the closest ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, opposing each other at short intervals. The rain picked up outside my study window when suddenly I heard a scream. That wasn't from the game, it sounded like it came from outside. I got out of the chair and ran to the window, but it was pitch black. I couldn't see anything. Lightning flashed and briefly lit up the street below. There was nothing there. Maybe it really was from the game? I went back to the computer. You hear a woman's screams. There are doors marked 1 to 13. Which will you choose? Okay, I thought. They probably wouldn't expect anyone to pick 13 off the bat, so I typed in 13. There it was again. It sounded even closer than before. I looked down at the speakers and then I remembered. I turned the speakers off. It wasn't the game. I sat and waited, listening closely. The room was dark minus the light coming off the monitor. Rain beat harder against the window outside. All was silent but for the water hitting the glass. I turned back to the computer. You see blood on the walls and hear a woman's screams coming from directly beneath you. What will you do? A dark sense of foreboding washed over me. The room itself was bare, for wooden walls and a wooden floor, all splattered in pixel blood. A single window took up about half of the opposite wall. This time there was a forest in the distance. Lightning flashed. The hooded figure was right there in their window. I screamed. Leave room. The door is locked. Of course it was. Hide. There's nowhere to hide. Of course not. There was a tapping at my window. I jumped again. How could there be a tapping at my window? I lived on the 4th floor. It had to be the wind. Or a tree branch. So why was I so scared to go and look? The text on the screen began to change. The window breaks. The hooded figure enters the room. It approaches you slowly. What will you do? There was a time limit to do things in the game? It never said the story would keep moving if I didn't do anything. Punch hooded figure. I didn't know what else to do. It was a bare room with nothing of apparent use in it. You punch the hooded figure, but he stabs you in the throat. You are dead. Will you try again? I sighed. I was rapidly losing interest in the game, but I had one more attempt left. Might as well use it. Yes. You see the large mansion before you that haunts your dreams. It's old. Dark. Scary. A figure peers at you from the window. Will you go in? Well, that was new. Also kinda creepy. There was a hooded figure looking out one of the windows on the 3rd floor. As lightning flashed, I thought I saw one closing in from the mountains as well. The same one from my first attempt. I needed to get inside. Yes. I avoided the door on the left, went straight through the blue door and stood in the hallway debating which door to go through next. 13 turned out to be a dead end, but that still left 1 to 12. Simply too many numbers to choose at random and hope to get lucky. It said the woman's screams came directly from underneath room 13. Maybe door 11 had a way down and under. But what if it didn't? What if it was some random door and I only had one's chance to get it right before it was game over? Permanently. You hear footsteps. The text scrolled across the screen. The hooded figures were closing in already. It was too soon. I got ready to type in 11 when I stopped myself. No, the red door. It had to be the red door. I thought the same thing about unlucky 13 being the right door, and that didn't end up so well, but this time it had to be. I knew it was the red door. Leave room. There is a red door, a blue door, and a yellow door. Which door will you go through? Red. You are in a bathroom. What will you do? There had to be a secret entrance hidden somewhere in the room. I needed to find it before the hooded figures found me. Check bathtub. There's nothing special. Check cabinet. There's some unmarked pills and a toothbrush. Probably best to leave the unmarked pills alone. There was nothing else in the room, which meant... Check toilet. You put your hand in the toilet. There's something there. Will you pull it? Ugh. Yes. You pull and hear a click. A single tile raises in the middle of the room. What will you do? Did I really have much choice? Press tile. You press the tile. A section of the wall opens. Will you go through? Yes. I heard it again. This time much louder and clearer. It was downstairs. A woman downstairs was screaming. You enter a secret room. The screams are getting louder. You hear footsteps getting closer. There are 2 doors. Which will you go through? The text flashed at me on the screen as a storm raged outside. I waited and listened. No more screams. Nothing but the sound of heavy rain and strong winds. No. Not just rain and wind. There it was. It was faint, but it was there. Footsteps. Large, heavy boots like steel caps hitting the concrete. There was a knock on the door several apartments away. I glanced at the clock. 1 a.m., who was knocking on doors at this hour? You hear knocking nearby. Which door will you go through? The game text changed once more. It was starting to become more than just a coincidence. My heart began to race. What it said permadeath it couldn't mean, could it? Left. My heart jumped into my throat as I realized the last time I typed left I immediately died. You enter a laboratory. It seems an experiment was conducted here recently. Blood stains the operating table. What will you do? Outside was quiet. Did they answer the door? Maybe it was just a friend or family member coming home late who forget their key. Check desk. There's a report. Will you read the report? Yes. Report, October 1st, 2017. Subject complained of pain in stomach. Stomach was removed. Complaint ceased. New subject required. Report, October 2nd, 2017. New guest arrived today. Intelligence subpar but will suffice. Brain was removed. Transplant to new host to commence shortly. Report, October 3rd, 2017. Transplant a success. Report, October 6th, 2017. Subject complained of pain in lower limbs. Limbs will be removed. Further study required. I stared at the computer screen. I didn't want to play anymore. I had no idea what was going on, but it was creeping me out and nothing was making sense. Clank. 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 The footsteps outside were getting closer. They were slow, methodical. Another knock on the door. It was perhaps 2 or 3 doors down this time. What do you? I didn't hear the end of the sentence. I swallowed and turned back to the computer, my heart beating faster and faster. The footsteps are getting closer. You must make a choice. Will you find the girl or will you escape? Escape. I typed it without thinking. I just wanted it to end. You must find the exit. Leave room. The door is locked. Of course it was. There was a single door ahead. Open door. You open the door. There's a hallway with a single door at the end. There are 2 windows. What will you do? If I tried to jump out the window, the character would probably die. He was on the 2nd floor after all. Lightning flashed through the windows and my heart stopped. There was a forest of pixel trees just outside, but lining the forest were countless hooded figures, all just standing there. Watching. Waiting. With each flash of lightning they seemed to grow in number. Open door. You're not close enough. Run to door. You run to the door. A woman screams from a nearby room. Several of the hooded figures were getting closer. Others remained behind, as if on watch. Open door. You enter a greenhouse. It's dark with no lights. What will you do? Turn on light. Cannot find switch. Light match. You don't have a match. Walk forward. You can't see. I tapped my foot furiously as I racked my brain trying to think of commands. Like clockwork, the in-game lightning continued to flash on the monitor. The entire wall of the greenhouse was glass with the forest in the background. Each time it flashed, several of the hooded figures were closer than before. Then it hit me. I typed in walk forward and waited. As the lightning flashed in-game, I pressed enter. You walk forward. A row of shelves blocks your path. I typed in turn left and walk forward, waited, and then pressed enter as the game flashed again. The hooded figures were almost right by the glass wall. My heart raced. There was another knock outside. This time it was next door. There was a door just ahead. I could reach it with the next flash. I typed in run to door and waited. And waited. The screen remained dark. White text began to scroll. Are you sure you want to leave the woman behind? Yes. Are you really sure? This action cannot be undone. Yes. Lightning flashed. The hooded figures were right outside the glass wall. There was a knock at my front door. Run to door. I pressed enter. The screen went black. I waited. The wind and rain raged outside. I strained, my heart sitting in my throat as I waited for another knock. None came. As you run from the mansion, you hear screams in the distance. The hooded figures watch but don't follow. They have their sacrifice for tonight, but you have escaped. The screen faded to black before congratulations began to flash in large letters in a variety of colors. There were no further knocks at the door. I turned the computer off and got into bed. I lay there listening to the sounds of the storm until daybreak. As I left my apartment the next morning, I saw police cars surrounding the building entrance. Apparently, a woman was found dead. Her legs were cut off and had yet to be found. Story 2. The Lost Haunted Mansion Boat Ride. As a massive fan of creepy Disney things, I have spent countless hours learning obscure facts about the park's history. Once I start, I can't seem to stop digging into the urban legends surrounding certain events and attractions. This fanatical addiction is what brought on the path toward learning the untold origins of the Haunted Mansion Boat Ride. It was going to be called Captain Culpepper's Crypt and was a ride based on an infamous gravestone within the attraction's queue line. The tombstone reads that the captain had braved the sea only to die in his very own bathtub. The thing that many people don't know about this character from the queue line is that he was actually based on a real person. A homeless man at that, who would oddly dress in a sailor raincoat and would loiter around Disney Studios begging for food. Walt apparently helped him get back onto his feet a few times, only to see him continually fall back into alcoholism and despair. Many of the employees there, including Walt, gave up faith on the man and eventually started ignoring him, even going as far as stepping over him and avoiding eye contact when they would walk by. That was until one day Walt was walking up to the studio and noticed that the man was lying face down in a puddle outside. Authorities were called and they declared that the man had starved to death over the past month or so living outside of the studio. Ever since then, Walt and many of his other employees would speak about him in passing, always referring to him as Captain Culpepper, due to him looking a little like the villain from the 1963 film Mad World. They essentially all felt very bad for ignoring the man, but also claimed that some people you just couldn't help. That was why Walt later decided to dedicate a character in the original Haunted Mansion to the old sailor. He asserted that even though the man was not able to create anything very memorable in his own life, he at least could inspire a great character within his. Years later, when Walt conceived the second Haunted Mansion for Disney World, this captain figure was amplified and Imagineers decided to create a mock-up of an actual water-based ride of its own, to be positioned behind the mansion in the woods. Most people do not know, but they actually began construction on this ride. However, from the early days of it being built, the project was riddled with issues. Fires would start for seemingly no reason, and birds would just kill themselves in the construction area. Then even a worker was killed due to a freak accident when he tried leaning on one of the makeshift cliff sides, and the entire facade came tumbling down onto him. It was at that point that Walt's brother Roy decided to put a stop to the construction of the ride. He was always a more pragmatic man than Walt, but the kind of issues they were having with the building were unlike any he had ever experienced, and he was even beginning to be a little superstitious. See, it was well known in their circle that Captain Culpepper was based on a man who died outside the studios, so things were definitely seeming pretty spooky. The only issue though was due to the problematic building location, up on a hill and close in proximity to Haunted Mansion. They were not able to easily remove components that had been already built there. It's rumored that there was a small body of water already created along with a number of buildings and a creepy large sailor statue out in the woods, built out of bamboo and reeds. In the ride's script, the statue was apparently built for the captain by a mysterious tribal people. Learning about this ride as a Disney geek/urban explorer was probably not a great idea. My buddy Jason and I also write a blog about exploring Disney parks, so this was definitely something we were going to check out. However, it would take some planning. Sneaking into backstage areas in the park is not as easy as it might seem. We would need to research employee rotations, break patterns, etc., and not to mention get back there when there weren't any other guests around. So, one night a few months ago we finally did it. We hopped up onto a wall in the queue and ran back into some woods around the side of the building. Soon we found ourselves around the side of the house and walking into a forest. I became increasingly nervous as we stepped over a few barricades, cautioning us to stay out. There was no turning back at this point though. If we were going to maybe get banned for this, at least we had to find what we were looking for. We searched around the woods for a while, pretty much finding nothing. The area back there didn't really even seem large enough to house an attraction, so we started second-guessing the rumors altogether. At that moment, I walked around the side of the hill we were on and saw an artificial-looking cave in the side of it. I could have sworn I had already looked there, but I guess I missed it somehow. There was an arrow-shaped sign beside it labeled "Abandon Hope, all ye who enter here" in a spooky Disney font. I thought that was a nice touch. Behind it, believe it or not, was the horrific bamboo sculpture we had heard so much about standing over the cave confidently. Jason snapped a photo and stepped inside the cave as we gazed at it in fear. The cave actually led to a queue line. They still had light background music playing, which was mixed with these spooky sounds of wind and the ocean. I had heard about when explorers trespassed through the abandoned river country, there was music playing in the background, so I guess I thought maybe there's some reason they had left this one on too. That was until I noticed what was next though. Something I will never forget until this day. The boat ride was actually running. The ride vehicles were these little wooden rowboats, and they were just cycling like a normal ride as if employees were there running it. However, there wasn't a single cast member anywhere in sight though. I guess at that point our curiosity got the best of us, because we did something unimaginably stupid. We got onto the ride. There's things you can take back in this world, and I only wish this mistake was one of them. You could tell it was older-fashioned technology than the other rides in the park. It almost seemed like it was incomplete too. It was closer to Mr. Toad's Wild Ride level technology than anything else, having mannequins and wooden cutouts that moved in front of the ride vehicle as we passed. In the first room there were figures of a mother and father hunched over in the corner of a room, while a boy in a raincoat watched from the dinner table. Demonic sounds of the parents devouring something echoed throughout the room. Jason and I bewildered each other, already ready to get off the ride. However, I wasn't getting in that water. Who knew what kind of machinery and chemicals were floating around inside there? Then the next room somehow was even worse than the first. The boy with the raincoat was in it again, only he was a teenager this time, and he was staring out over the side of a boat towards the figure of a blonde teenage girl reaching her arms up, drowning in the water. The sound effect in this room was just gargling and then someone's muffled attempts to speak. Horrified, I gazed up at the boy as we exited the room, and his head looked like it was in a different position, staring right at me. Then we entered a room with a green light shining from below the water. There was a massive statue of Walt Disney saying dreams can come true, if we have the courage to pursue them. He was standing above the boy with the raincoat, who was now a man, and something about the massive size of Walt almost made it feel like a religious experience. The last room was the one that really got us though. The figures in this one were two teens dressed strangely like us, laying out in the woods. Then a cutout of the man with the raincoat popped out in front of the boat, The sound effect this time was just weeping. At this point Jason was just done with it and he said he was going to get out of the boat. I urged him not to as we entered another room. This one with several tombstone busts, one being the man with the raincoat, and 2 others being us. Jason saw this and immediately jumped out of the boat. He started wading through the water as I screamed for him to come back up, but he didn't listen, he just swam into the darkness. Then I heard footsteps trudging through the water. I yelled his name out a few more times, but he was gone. Only this time they were approaching me. I sat there in the darkness not knowing what to do, just begging for the ride to get back to the loading area. Something then slammed against the back of the boat, thrusting me forward. I forced my eyes closed, just wishing for it to go away. Then it slammed against me again, harder this time. Then a 3rd time, only this time it was so hard that I slammed up against the lap bar and opened my eyes. Much to my surprise and joy, I was back in the loading area for the ride. I hopped out of the boat, ran through the queue line so fast I could have won a marathon. On my way out, I turned back to look at the cave's entrance one last time. It wasn't there though. It was just a hill again. Till this day I still don't know if it was ever really there or if I had somehow lost it. I mean, I have told Disney security, police, and honestly any other authority who would listen about Jason's disappearance. Only this is that they all deny the attraction ever existed in any capacity at all. I know what I saw though, and I know something was back there in those woods. So I guess in the scariest ride in Disney World is really only a cover for the true horror that sits behind it. Story 3. The House on Oak Street. One fateful day I was just enjoying myself, feeling some music and eating some chips, when I drove past a weird-looking house. The sign nearby read Oaks Building. What the heck tot now means? I kept following the house with my eyes, and I can swear I saw someone in the left upstairs window. He waved at me with a creepy smile. But I pressed the gas pedal to the floor and went away as fast as possible. I couldn't shake the House on Oak Street from my mind, when I received a message on my ancient AOL account. That day was cryptic and disturbing. The sender's username was Secret House Watcher, and the message simply read, "You must visit the house on Oak Street. Go alone." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I read those words. I couldn't shake the feeling that something ominous was at play. Curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself driving to Oak Street later that week. The house was a decaying relic of the past, an imposing mansion that looked like it hadn't seen life in decades. Overgrown weeds and vines had claimed the front yard, and the windows were all shattered. I hesitated but finally pushed the creaking front door open. The interior was like a time capsule from the past, filled with dusty furniture covered in tattered sheets. An eerie silence hung heavy in the air, and the dim light filtering through the cracked windows cast long, unsettling shadows. I cautiously made my way through the house, unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak of the floorboards sent my heart racing. As I ascended a grand staircase, I noticed a room at the end of the hallway. The door was ajar, and a faint, flickering light seeped through the opening. I approached slowly and peeked inside. The room was filled with old, antique mirrors lining the walls. Their reflections distorted and eerie. It felt like I was trapped in a hall of endless reflections. The flickering light was coming from a single candle in the center of the room. A handwritten note lay next to it. I picked it up and read, "You have been chosen to witness the truth, to see the other side." As I gazed into the mirrors, my reflection began to change. It wasn't me anymore, but a shadowy figure with hollow eyes. Panic gripped me as I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet. Suddenly, I found myself in a room that wasn't in the decrepit mansion. It was a small, windowless space, with cold, damp walls and an overpowering smell of decay. I had no idea how I got there. My phone buzzed with a notification. I checked it, and to my horror, it was a message from Secret House Watcher once again, "You're not alone now." The walls around me started moving. They moved towards me. I realized that the house on Oak Street was a portal to something sinister. I had been lured there, and now I was trapped in a place which were just greedy evil. I don't know how much time has passed since I entered that house, but one thing is certain, I am not alone, and I may never escape the house on Oak Street. Story 4. Ghost School. I go to an all-girls private school. On our campus we have 6 buildings, 4.5 of which are over 100 years old. We have a mansion on campus. It was a chapel when the school was run by nuns, and now we use it as the language center. The chapel and the mansion that is said to be haunted by a boy, a girl, and a nun. The story goes that one night, 101 years ago, Alice was praying in the chapel. She was 13, and went to my school at the time. Alice lived on campus, in the dorms that existed back then. She was about to leave when a boy from a neighboring all-boys school walked in. The boy's name was Henry, and he was in love with Alice. Though he was not allowed to be there, the two started conversing. All of a sudden, a nun named Sister Jane heard the commotion. It was way past 7:30, the girls' curfew, and the curious nun went into the chapel to find the pair kissing. This nun had extreme anger issues. She took a candle holder and brought it down upon Henry's head. The impact immediately split his skull open, and he was dead in a matter of minutes. Sister Jane, also infuriated at Alice, was about to kill her as well when Alice shoved her. The nun toppled backwards and fell right into a pew. She rose angrily and took a lit candle. She lit Alice's hair and uniform on fire, turned, and ran out of the chapel. Turning, she shut the large doors of the chapel, locked them, adjusted her habit, folded her hands, and smiled smugly at the barely audible sound of the girl screaming. She walked off away without looking back. The next morning, the church was discovered to be half burned to the ground. When the other sisters called for Sister Jane, she was not found. Almost a year later, they found a skeleton in a nearby forest. The chapel was rebuilt over the same spot as the old one. In present day, I was walking through the hallway of my school to French class when I decided to light a candle for my aunt, who was having surgery that day. As I turned down to the chapel, my friends Mary Grace, Catherine, Emily, and Katie followed me, since we had another 5 minutes before class. As I picked up some matches, someone smacked them out of my hand. I turned to my friend Mary Grace, who was standing next to me at the time, and was about to yell at her for smacking the matches out of my hand when, all of a sudden, Katie gripped her head as if someone had bashed it open. Then Catherine started screaming and pulling at her hair and tearing at her uniform. Emily toppled into the pew, as if someone had pushed her, and I followed her seconds after. I screamed as all of the candles toppled out of their holders, instantly going out. Then, the door slammed shut, and we heard a loud click as it locked. We saw a nun's habit outside through the windows, and then Mary Grace fainted. I remembered waking up at home the next morning, thinking it was a dream, but Katie wasn't in school for a week. We found out later that she had fallen and her head had broken open. I don't go into the chapel anymore, and I hardly look at it. There have not been any further encounters since then, but other girls have reported seeing a boy and a girl kissing, looking left and right, then disappearing. Could it be Alice and Henry? Asterisk 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 asterisk. Story 5. The Clown in My Township. I like to play games on my phone. One of my favorite is a Match 3 game where you earn stars and refurbish a dilapidated old mansion. While waiting for my lives to replenish on that game, I would go back and forth between YouTube and Instagram, killing time until I could go back to the mansion. During one of the many ads for the game, that you must endure, to earn extra coins, I saw an ad for a game where you build your own town. I thought I would give it a try and found that I enjoyed it. Soon I was spending more time in the town than I was at the mansion. It was fun building my little town. I had neighborhoods, boardwalks, beaches, parks. A farm with cows, chickens, and sheep. I had all of the factories arranged neatly on one side of town away from the little housing developments and downtown business area. I had numerous waterfront properties adorned with all manner of trees and flowers. I had a university, library, art gallery, laboratory, burger joint, pizza place, yada, yada, yada. I was well on my way to city status. As my town grew, so did the population. I began to notice all kinds of characters walking about the town. There were elderly people, young people, babies, pets, and professional people from all walks of life. There was a man with a sandwich board and another, strangely enough, dressed in a hot dog costume, who would stop randomly and behave as if he was pleading with an invisible individual. There was much walking and driving, with sudden stopping and starting with no apparent rhyme or reason to direction or destination. Sometimes I would sit and just watch the goings-on in town, picking out the new residents. And then one day, while observing the actions of my little townspeople, I noticed the clown. He was walking about town filling balloons with helium. He would stop in random places and just look around. Occasionally, he would look up as if he were staring directly at me. He kinda creeped me out, and I looked at him and said under my breath, "Get the fuck out of my town, Pennywise." I didn't much care for the thought of having a clown in town, but I knew there was a circus in the game I'd be required to build at some point, so I figured I'd have to deal with it. I didn't pay much attention to him after that, but that all changed 2 nights ago. I had come to spend time in town after I had used all my lives at the mansion. I was in the process of feeding the chickens when I saw him. That fucking clown. This time he was perched on top of the barn looking directly at me. Now you have to understand that in the township, no one leaves the ground unless they're one of the construction workers, and this motherfucker wasn't wearing a hard hat. He looked at me and smiled, and I noticed the blood on his teeth. On the ground, beside the barn, I saw the partially eaten remains of the little boy in the blue cap who always walked his pit bull around town. I dropped my phone trying to close the app. I put the phone on my nightstand and didn't touch it for the rest of the night. Needless to say, I had a hard time sleeping. The next day I did a Google search on the app to see if it would occasionally play pranks on the user. But it showed no information. I didn't go back to the app for several days, and when I did, it was with the understanding that if that fucking clown was still there, I was uninstalling that shit. In the past, whenever I opened the app, it always opened in the area in front of the railway station. Whatever current event was going on was usually being staged in that area. For the past couple of days, that event was a jungle expedition. What greeted me was a scene from a horror movie, albeit a tiny, animated horror movie. The Jungle Quest expedition had been incinerated by an explosion at the fuel factory across from their campsite. Their charred remains lay scattered amongst the destruction of the camp. The Great Dane dog that I frequently saw about town, being walked by a young man in his 20s, was gnawing on a bloody leg bone. He looked up at me with demonic red eyes. I pinched the screen to reduce the area and got a bird's eye view of the death and destruction that had engulfed my township. Anything that wasn't currently on fire was smoldering. The bodies of the townspeople were scattered everywhere, but not all of the residents were dead. Yet. I watched in horror as they murdered each other. The brown-haired scientist pointed the giant ray gun at the busker and disintegrated him. He dissolved into a very lifelike bloody mass. The female jogger with the brown ponytail, in the black track suit, was being brutally raped by the workman who was always walking around town in overalls, a hard hat, and carrying a wrench. As I watched, he bashed her in the head with the wrench to take some of the fight out of her. Her left eye popped out of its socket with the force of the blow. The young blonde female in the pink shorts and crop top was being dealt a similar fate by the 3 guys from the House of Luck. They didn't have a wrench, but they did have a tire iron. There was blood everywhere. The bride and groom on the steps of the photography studio next to the wedding chapel were shot dead, execution style, by one of the town's roaming police officers. He shot the photographer in the same manner and was heading in the direction of the school. There were children on the playground next to the building. A farmhand in the cow shed stabbed another worker with a pitchfork, while another pitchfork-wielding worker leaned over the fence and stabbed the guy in the hot dog suit. I thought it looked like some kind of demented weenie roast and stifled a hysterical laugh. One of the workers at the bakery shoved his coworker into the oven. Another died in a similar fashion at the forge beside the mine. The fire truck and ambulance ran through the town, no longer switching direction randomly, but plowing through fields and over the little farm hands as they toiled among the cacao trees and sugar cane. Their bodies writhing in torment as they lay dying. The heavy-set African-American woman who was always walking her little dog was being beaten to death by the guitar player. he repeatedly smashed his guitar into her face. After the guitar broke, he finished her off with a board from a nearby building site. There were always new building sites. The board had nails in it. A mother pushing a stroller with her infant son was murdered by the town artist when he picked up a grill from the yard of a pink bungalow and smashed it down on them both. The toddler died instantly. The mother lay bleeding with a gaping head wound. I don't know why I didn't close out the game and delete the app then and there, but some part of me had to know. Had to see. That fucking clown. I knew he was responsible. I scanned each area, but with the fire and smoke, and the screaming it was hard to see. Hard to concentrate. But at last, I found him. He was once again atop the barn, which had doubled in size since the last time I had upgraded it. It was the only structure in my township that was not engulfed in flames. Immediately I noticed the barn doors were open and the bodies of all of the township's children were strewn about inside, all in various states of decay and most having been partially cannibalized. Even animated, the scene was graphic and horrific. I finally dragged my eyes to him. He had been patiently waiting. He was proud of his work and wanted me to view it entirely. He smiled broadly at me, blood and gore clearly visible in his teeth. My hands were shaking and at some point I knew I was going to vomit. I closed the app and immediately went to settings, but knew I wasn't going to be able to uninstall it fast enough. The damage was done. He was in and he wasn't leaving. I am afraid to go to the mansion,